Welcome, everyone, to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. I'm going to introduce our guests in a second. I'm going to get into our topic. But before we dive in, wanted to just a couple of instructions. So we are live here on LinkedIn. We're also live on YouTube. We're going to be watching the comments on LinkedIn. So if you've got a question, comment as we go here today, go ahead and drop it into the LinkedIn page. We'll see that, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. If you are on YouTube, watching live on YouTube, I'm not going to be watching comments on YouTube. So jump over to LinkedIn if you want to leave a comment and we'll handle it live. However, if you're watching the replay on either LinkedIn or YouTube, go ahead and leave comments and questions on those. We will monitor those in the coming days and weeks. Make sure we reply to those. So either platform and you're watching replays, go ahead and leave comments there. So let me get into our topic and then introduce our speakers today. So our topic today, connection over extraction, building community that scales. With all this talk of AI and replacing workers and automating everything, we thought it would be interesting to really kind of talk about what does it mean to build community? How do we build community in kind of this modern world that we're in? The importance of it, the value of it. Obviously, we're going to talk about AI, but it's really going to be a function of how do we keep community and connection going throughout that process. I have certainly found that the companies that do that well are seeing better gains with AI, not just kind of replacing everything with AI, but leveraging AI and using AI to build some of these things. So I'm curious to have this conversation. We've got some interesting folks. Let me introduce everyone. So first up, I've got Tony Martignetti. He is a founder of Inspired Purpose Partners, and he's the host of the Virtual Campfire podcast. He's also author of Climbing the Right Mountain and Campfire Lessons for Leaders. And his work focuses on helping leaders make a bigger impact without burning out. And his strong emphasis is on purpose, identity, and the human side of leadership. With all that, Tony, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, welcome. It's great to have you. Next up, I've got Tracy Brower. She is a PhD sociologist. She's an author. She's also a senior contributor to Forbes and Fast Company. She's vice president of workplace insights for Steelcase. And her book, Critical Connections, examines the growing crisis of disconnection and how stronger relationships and community improve work and life. And her work explores community happiness and the future of work and life. With all that, Tracy, welcome to the program. Oh, you're on mute still. Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, no, likewise. I'd love to just kind of start with a general kind of take on this kind of AI and connection, and where are you seeing kind of companies or organizations struggle with this kind of maintaining connection as technology is kind of advancing so quickly? Just kind of give your initial take on where are we with some of these things, and then we can kind of get into the topics. Tony, why don't we start with you on this one?
Sure thing. And first of all, I'll just say, AI has been just a wonderful tool for us to advance where we're heading in terms of our society, our work, and it's something that if used right is going to be a huge unlock for how we're going to make great things happen. So I don't want to be an anti-AI. But the thing is that we need to make sure we're doing it the right way and using it the right way. And connection can be truly unlocked if we're using AI as a way to augment how we're connecting with others. And so the way I've looked at it is that as we're connecting with others, we got to make sure that we're using the human element as a way to see how we're coming together with others, making sure community is not an afterthought, but it actually is at the forefront. That AI can be that thing that it is helping us to connect better, not replacing it. And so that's important.
Great. Tracy, I'd love to get your take. Like, how does AI impact critical connections for you? What's your view on things right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tony's right. I mean, we don't want to be Luddites. We want to lean in, put our toes in the water, learn how to surf before the wave is coming at us, for sure. I also think we are very wise to be cautious. We want to, I think, make sure that we're using AI for kind of left brain things, efficiency and effectiveness, and that we're not using AI to create relationships or to solve needs of loneliness that we have or belonging or connection. AI psychosis is a real thing where
Mm,
people start to develop relationships with AI and
yeah.
then replace real life relationships, or start to believe that those relationships are real. I think the other thing we need to be really careful about is a concern for cognitive surrender. I love that term. I just
Ooh, yeah.
the
Yes.
more we know about AI, the more we rely on AI to do our work. Sometimes our thinking declines, our level of processing declines, our commitment declines, our motivation declines, our memory of what we've done declines, and we can use AI a ton brilliantly and effectively, but we've got to be really intentional about where we're using it, how we're using it, and which things we choose to not use AI for.
Mhm.
Most importantly, for our relationships and really connecting with other people.
Yeah. So let's talk about this relationship. I'm kind of curious what for each of you kind of defines effective relationships or effective connections. Like what do you have any models or any kind of checklists that you're looking at to kind of evaluate an organization or a team and how sort of connected or disconnected they are? Tracy, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are so many elements to connection and to what makes connection effective. One of the elements is commitment, like how much time we spend. On
Mhm.
average, it takes about 60 hours to make a friend. So there's a commitment
Interesting.
level that defines great connections. There's also continuity, like our best connections have continuity over time. We
Okay.
can have lots of new friends and make new friends and kind of continually be refreshing our networks, and that's great. Continuity is also really, really helpful. Another element of important relationships is just our authenticity and the way that we show up in those relationships. When we build trust, that is a reciprocal process. I share something and you share a little more, and then I
Mhm.
share a little more until we're, kind of happy with our level of sharing. Empathy is also a really important sort of assessment of relationships. To what extent are we really able to, be present together and empathetic together? Because presence helps to drive empathy. And I think really the other thing is our identity. When
Yeah.
we are really
Yeah.
clear about,
Yeah.
gosh, what am I getting out of this relationship? What am I giving to this relationship? Both of those are really, really important in terms of thinking about how valuable that relationship is to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony, for you, how do you kind of evaluate or what are you looking for when you're, looking at teams or looking at organizations and how connected or disconnected they are?
Yeah, so I'm just going to build from what Tracy said. It was just wonderful that she went there. What she left, the last note that she left on is identity, and I think that's an element that I speak a lot about. Is how do we use identity as a lens of connection? And what I think is important is that you get your you make your connections through going deeper into who are we,
Hmm.
who am I, and how do I expand the aperture a bit so people get to know the parts of me that I don't often bring into the room. And I'm not talking about, we have to be so vulnerable we're sharing everything,
Yeah.
but just allowing other people to see a bit more about more than my title. I'm not just the title that I bring into the room
Yeah.
or the role that I've been hired for, but sharing more about aspects of who I am so that people start to say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And now we can start to see elements bring a little bit more texture. And that's where we start to connect deeper and we get to innovate faster through that element of connection that we form. So
Yeah.
I think that depth is where, when I'm working with teams, I'm trying to get them to see beyond what they often see most of all, which is the surface level, the title, the box we often think that we want to put people in. How do we expand beyond that through depth and expansion?
Yeah. I'm curious. I work a lot of CEOs and senior executives, leadership teams. And I think one of the things they always struggle with, and I certainly struggled with it when I was running my company, is, how much and when to kind of bring this in. Like, it's really easy to focus on, like, here's the work to get done. Here are the metrics. Are we hitting the revenue
Mhm.
numbers, right? Like, we can be very kind of objective, kind of focused, left brain focused. But, we need that connection to perform as a team, right? Particularly for a highly collaborative team, like, we need to get to know each other. But what are some things that you've seen or you advise, leaders to do to help bring some of that in the right way and the right time? Is there any guidelines, strategies, and stuff that you recommend? Tracy, I'd love to hear you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the mistakes that we make is that we think that all this connection stuff needs to be in addition to the
Yeah.
work. Like, oh, I got to spend all this time and I got to order a lot of pizza and have some pizza parties or do escape rooms or whatever. But that's sort of a myth. The reality is that we form our strongest bonds when we're working together. We're rolling up sleeves. We're sharing tasks together, not just social. And so I think what we want to make sure to do is create opportunities for connection in line with the work. Yes, we can do the retirement luncheons and the baby showers, and that's all really important because when we feel social connection, we tend to follow up and follow through more effectively. But also when we do it in line with the work. So a lot of times a leader might say, let's get down to business. We know good leadership is about effectiveness and efficiency. But if we just spend a couple of minutes kind of checking in as the meeting gets started, that can help us go faster ultimately. So when leaders help team members get to know each other, when leaders are present and accessible and predictable, they build stronger relationships and stronger trust. And that helps people to bring themselves fully and to feel that sense of belonging. When leaders are really clear about shared expectations, mutual goals, and roles, that helps significantly. And when leaders create the opportunity for people to connect outside of the team or outside of their leadership as well, with a mentor in the organization or with work that might be adjacent to my swim lane, and I get to still like stretch and grow in new areas. Those are 4 pragmatic ways that leaders can help create those connections.
Yeah, those are great. You reminded me of one that I learned years ago, which was a game changer for me. Which I would get into these conversations, whether it was a team or an individual, and we had something to do, like we had an agenda, we had things to do, things to decide, or we had things to resolve. And one of the things I kind of realized is I needed to kind of check in with them on where they were coming into the meeting before jumping into it, and even just kind of this. Like, how are we doing? Or like, where are you coming into this meeting? And just recognizing that, like, I might be here ready to go. They may be here. And before I get into the details, we need to sync, right? Like, we just need to kind of figure out, like, where are we each? And, what else is going on that might prevent us from having a really effective conversation right now? Maybe we need to deal with that before we deal with it. So it's just kind of appreciating the fact that the other person or the other people may not be in the same position I am right now, and recognizing that and taking the time to align before digging into particularly complicated or potentially emotional topics or complicated or things that have a high degree of kind of stress around them. Level setting is something that I find super helpful, and I see good leaders doing that quite a bit.
Great point.
Tony, what are some of the things that you kind of work with leaders on, or you've seen good leaders do in terms of developing this connection inside their teams?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is asking the questions of obviously Simon Sinek came with this why of, giving the context of why we do what we do. And then people started thinking about, well, what's the what are we going to accomplish? But then there's the how. And the how, I think, is something that we need to maybe double click on. And that's what I think we've just covered. I mean, Tracy just brought this up, is like the how is asking people, like, how are we going to approach this? And how do we bring more of, what you are, how you are arriving? How are you bringing more of who you are into this work? And asking questions that get people to show up and share who they are at this moment. And that's the other question of who is in the room and how are they showing up is important to how we get the work done. So those questions are what leaders should be asking themselves before they get to the what are we going to accomplish?
Yeah.
Because the what can get done, but it's really about slowing things down enough to be able to understand what are we working with.
Yeah, I would say, can I build on that?
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yes.
One of the things we know is that people crave great leadership and strong leadership. And one of the elements of cultures that deliver the best results are leaders that are really clear about vision and mission and direction. And we prefer legibility. Like, we trust people more, we connect with them more when they're easy to read. So when leaders are really clear and directed in their decision making and they're not shy about having a point of view, that is great for connection. And that's in dynamic tension and balanced with that need for people to feel involved and participating and like authors of their destiny. So I think that those two, and Tony, you're pointing to a lot of this, those two together are so critical to connections. I get to participate, I get to be involved, and I'm inspired by a strong leader with a
Mhm.
strong point of view that I can read, and those make it easier to connect.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because I think a lot of leaders struggle with this, right? I've seen it in most of the CEOs that I've coached, which is this kind of, how much do I come with, okay, here's the vision, here's what I'm doing, kind of the strong, really directional approach, but then also wanting to make sure that people feel, heard and included and have input. Like, you know, I not to answer my own question, but maybe I will. Like, I find that good leaders actually do both of those things, right? They
Yes.
figure out how to integrate those two things and not make them actually competitive, but actually make them collaborating forces or feeding forces. What have you seen good leaders do to kind of actually bring that stuff together in terms of how do they work with the team, what questions they ask, how do they bring this stuff to the group? What are some insights there? I'll let Tony kind of start on this one.
Yeah, I mean, to bring those dynamics together, I think it starts with, you put out your vision and you say, this is what I think where we're headed, with your own sense of humility and confidence. So it's a mix of both, but you want to make sure that it's not so set in stone that there's no room for input. There's no room for people to add some color into the vision, because I think that's where we need to be able to, make sure people feel heard and seen in that vision, because it's not something that, is not going to have another voice in the room, because otherwise they're saying, like, okay, we're just going to be the executors of your vision.
Yeah.
And that's
Tracy.
not empowering. Do you want people feeling to have a hand in shaping what's going next, because then they feel like it's not yours, it's ours.
Yeah, that shared ownership is a really, really good point. I think about this as intellectual humility. And there's actually really interesting academic research that we build the most credibility when we have both a strong point of view and the humility to assume it's not the only point of view, the humility to ask questions, the humility to know that our right answers aren't everybody's right answers. So I think it's about being clear about our direction, like you were saying, Tony, asking questions. I think a lot of times we say things like, does everybody agree? Is everybody okay with that? But we're really best off to say, who sees this differently? What other, potential alternatives are there? And I think the other thing for us to know is how is the decision being made, and how are we being clear about that? And what are the bright lines instead of the gray areas? And let's not ask questions that we don't want the answers to, right? Like, let's be really clear about the things where we're not interested in input, because I think that's a mistake that leaders can make, is they think they're supposed to ask for input, but there are certain things that are non-negotiable, either from their point of view or the organization's point of view. So being really clear about how those decisions are made, how the input will be used, and where we actually want input.
I've used this model. It isn't a perfect analogy, but it's been helpful at times. It's kind of like these should be sort of non-Newtonian liquids or oobleck, kind of thing. It's like, they're solid, right? But with enough kind of force, and if we want to mold it, like we can mold it and shape it, but it's not, it's not squishy, right? Like I'm going to put something on the table and you can't just poke a finger through it. But if you have an idea and you want to put pressure, okay, we can shape it, we can move it around, right? So it's got some firmness, but it's also flexible in some way. But it's a trick. I think it's being able to do both of those things is where the good leaders and good teams are able to figure this out. Tony, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just, first of all, Bruce, I love that analogy. That was really well done. It got me really thinking. But just the sense of, being able to know the known knowns and the known unknowns, and be able to work with that, like I like that idea of the bright lines, things that are like, hey, here's where we are, and here's what we don't know about where we're headed, and that's okay. And that's not going to diminish the the confidence that people have in you as a leader. What it does is it allows them to say, oh, this person is laying it out on the table, being very clear,
Yeah.
and giving us some room to be able to play with the unknowns.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah.
At least gives us some guardrails.
Yeah, I like it. I want to pivot slightly into kind of some of this tech stuff and AI, but otherwise, like I work with so many teams now that are distributed and remote, and we're meeting virtually, we're meeting in person occasionally. Right? Like there's so much sort of technical mediation of these connections and relationships. What are some things you've seen in terms of kind of good practices, right? Things that you've seen organizations, teams do to use technology effectively, or at least not let it become a big barrier to connection. And then my follow-up, so is going to be where are the not so good practices you have. But let's talk about the positive things. Tracy, what have you seen teams do in terms of using technology to build and maintain connections?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really smart when we use technology and we're clear about the role that technology is going to play. Number one, we're really clear about where we're not going to use technology. I think another one is when we're using technology to connect. So we're cameras on. One of the things that I've seen work really well is to have wormholes open. So some teams will just keep a wormhole open every day. So you're kind of side by side working together, even if you're not present together in physical terms.
Yep.
I think another one is when we can have small talk through technology. So we're using it for social. I think too, I always think about kind of the 3 C's of humanity, right? Like what we crave to do is to create, to be curious, and to connect. And so when we can maintain and sustain those as a team, that's brilliant. So if a team is using technology to answer every question and they're kind of shutting down their own curiosity, that's a problem. But if teams are coming up with questions and then they're investigating and researching using technology, that works really, really well. I think the other thing is that when we're really consistent in our technology in terms of our communication, because you know how teams can have challenges, like I prefer Teams and you prefer text and somebody else prefers something else. And we just have a hard time kind of meeting in the middle. When teams set some of those norms and expectations for each other, that works really well. And the other thing I would say is that technology works especially well when it helps us get in sync together. Like when people feel most disconnected, when they feel most lonely, is when they're out of sync in terms of their schedules and how they're showing up. So there was some really interesting research. They looked at people who were working all remote, people who were working all in the office, and people who were working hybrid, and who had the greatest levels of happiness, effectiveness, and fulfillment.
Yeah.
And all of those groups, shockingly, had similar levels of satisfaction, fulfillment, effectiveness. The difference was whether their friends were doing similar things. So if I was working from home and everybody else was in the office, that is not rewarding. Or if I'm in the office and I showed up on the day when nobody else is there. So technology can be really helpful in helping us to sync up our schedules. We still get privacy, of course, but sync up our schedules, sync up our work methods, sync up our norms in terms of communication, in terms of expectation setting and like management of the work processes and workflows. We can use it for a great connection through that synchronization.
Yeah. Tony, any practices you've seen teams use in terms of technology that help them?
Yeah, there's a couple things that, and I think about the whole design thinking model where it's like the diverge and converge, connecting dots and collecting dots and connecting dots. And, when I think about AI within teams, having it on and listening is a wonderful thing, because what happens is it's not replacing the way people are interacting, but what it's doing is it's listening almost like the empty chair stakeholder. And it's saying, okay, collecting all this information. I hear people talking. I hear what the conversation's going on. And at the end of the day, it can be like the after fact of like, what did we miss? What wasn't said? What might be not happening in this room that needs to be happening? And those questions, when we kind of set them up as like a recurring thing of, okay, you heard all the things that happen in this room. How can we make sure that we connect the dots that we didn't connect in the room, and also look for what was missing? And that synthesis that obviously we're great meaning makers as humans. That's our job as humans, is to make meaning, but also to look for what we may have missed along the way. That's what AI can do.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of things I think I do when I'm working with teams. One is trying to make sure everyone's equal citizen, right? So like from a technical point of view, connection speed, right? Like all that kind of stuff, because the moment someone doesn't have access or someone's connection is low or we can't hear their mic or like, it immediately makes them second class citizens. And so just whatever we need to do technically to make sure that everyone has equal access is a really important one for me. Another one is I usually try to, especially for longer, if it's more than 30-minute meeting, try to leave 5 minutes in the beginning of the meeting just to connect. Right. So, have some time to kind of check in with folks. I'll do to say, hey, what's present for you right now? Or what's, the best thing that's happened to you today? Or is there something where everyone just gets a chance to chat? The other reason I do that is I want to check everyone's microphone. I want to test the tech before I get into the meaty stuff. I'd rather find out that someone has a technical issue or you can't log in or we can't hear them or something. So just having, creating little moments for that before you get into the material can really help create some connection and make it feel like, we're here more than just to kind of get things done, but we're here to kind of connect and see what's going on as a team, particularly if you're fully remote. It's a tough one because we've done the magic window or the wormhole thing, depending on the team. That can be really helpful, having, open Slack messages or things like that. So you can kind of check with folks. The flip side of that, and maybe this will be kind of the segue into the next question, is one thing I find that tech can really be hard on is interrupting people in terms of their focus time. So I often have teams say there's windows. It's like usually about a 4-hour block during the day where we all agree there's going to be no tech, or everyone goes off of tech. And if you need to send a message, fine, put it in Slack, but just know you're not going to get answered till, after that period ends, just because I have so many teams that feel like with all this tech, they get slacked all the time, or they're getting messaged all the time, or people are like, hitting their Zoom calls and stuff like that. And it can be disruptive. Tracy, what are some things that you've seen challenges with technology on teams that actually have, hurt connections?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of that as notification culture, right? Like we've got to be able to set those boundaries. If we were going to have a wormhole, we might do it for a couple of hours a day or a half a day or just on Tuesdays, but we're setting those as teams. I think the other thing that can be a problem is when we make the tech the thing instead of making the people and the meeting the thing. And I've seen this so often on like you have the collaboration boards, and we're so worried about Post-it notes and capturing the notes and the key points that we like lose each other in the process. And of course we want to record, and of course we want to document and all the things, but when we can come together, that's so much better. I think the other thing too is if we sort of seed those human relationships, or if we end before we're finished. So you were talking about check-ins. I always think about those as check-ins or enrollment, like when we kind of say, hey, here I am, and here's my name, or here's what I'm thinking about today. I also really like check-outs because we solidify our thinking when we think out loud. We reinforce the value that we've had in the meeting. We reinforce the next steps we might need to take. So I always like to do a quick check-out. And when we're distant, it helps us make sure that we're both paying attention to task and relationship. And those checkouts can be helpful in that process.
Yeah.
Tony, how about you?
I love that. And just, kind of capturing what Tracy said, this closing the tabs, all the tabs we have open, we make sure they're all closed. And I think that's the human synthesis we need to do doing that. But I think one of the things that's coming to mind for me is something related to this topic, but maybe a little bit tangential. And that is the ghost work that we create. We create a lot of extra work just for the sake of the text there. Why don't we, run a report? We do all these things. And, I think middle managers are kind of, are the ones who are getting the brunt of this because people are generating things through AI, and then they're just kicking it up to the next level to review. And then that next person saying like, well, I don't have time to review all this stuff. So now I've got more work on my plate to review reports, output, things that have been generated by AI, that now I might have to use AI to actually make sense of it. And so now we're creating ghost work that needs to be reviewed or synthesized.
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure we're not just generating work for the sake of generating more work? And now we're busier than we used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's some really interesting data that the more companies use AI, the more frequently they're demanding AI use of employees, the more employees are facing burnout and they say, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed with demands. I had a colleague years ago, she was brilliant. She had to do this report all the time. And she was saying, I don't think anybody reads this report. So what she did is she like embedded in the report a sentence that said something like, if you've read to this point, please give me a call. I'll give you $10. She never got a call. She never got an email. But it's to your point, Tony,
Yeah.
like, and I think that has to do with connection and empathy and
Yeah.
effective work process. Like, am I generating this for my benefit? Like, hey, here are my notes from the meeting.
Yeah.
You don't need them. You didn't ask for them, but I feel productive because I'm sending them
Yep.
out. I think we've got to be thinking about like, what is the value of the, for the person who's receiving the work, not just the person who's generating more work for others. I love that ghost work concept. That's really good.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to hit time here. I want to make sure people have contact information. Tony, if people want to get a hold of you, find out what you're doing, what's the best way to get that?
Well, first of all, Bruce, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation so far. And the best way they can find me is to go to my website, tonymspeaks.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. That's a place where I'm very active. And please look out for my new book. It's coming out in the fall, Illuminating Hidden Brilliance. And I'm excited to engage with people through this channel.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll make sure put the link to the book when you get it down to the notes or to the LinkedIn page here so people can get it. And Tracy, if people want to find out what you're doing and contact you, what's the best way to get that?
Yeah, absolutely. So tracybrower.com is how you can find me, or on LinkedIn, I'm Tracy Brower, PhD. I'm on all the other usual social channels. You can find my books, Bring Work to Life, The Secrets to Happiness at Work, and Critical Connections, anywhere books are sold. So would love to have you reach out. And steelcase.com is a great resource as well. And I know we're all writers. Bruce, you've done a lot of writing in books as well. So we all like this pursuit together.
Yeah, no, excellent. Yeah, if people want to get a hold of me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com is my email, eckfeldt.com URL, and my book is Springboard. You can find it on my website and also on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for Tony and Tracy for being on this. This was a great conversation, great content. We could probably go for another 2 hours on this, but next time we'll do it again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this LinkedIn Live. We'll see you on the next one. Again, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave comments and questions. We'll all follow those and get back to you on there. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.